First of all, thank you so much. This is the first time I'm doing this. I'm very excited. Maybe I'm a little bit too excited. I even had free coffees before that because I'm so excited indeed. And it's just an opportunity for us to talk, to meet, to get to know each other. And also, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have in general. Just to introduce myself first, everyone. My name is Vitaly, and I've been spending, I think, the last, I don't know, 10 to 15 years, I guess, trying to figure out what we actually do in our world of UX and what it even means for us. And more importantly, how to basically solve complex challenges, well, mostly UX challenges, I would say, in complex and not so complex environments. That's me. That's me. What about you, everyone? Maybe we could just drop a line because we have like what, like 30, 31 people here. Where are you connecting from today, if I may ask? Can you just drop a line in the chat so we get to know each other? Oh, Philadelphia. Excellent. Hello, Nikki. So I'm going to drop in a link to the Google Doc here as well. Google Doc URL for questions. Okay, that's very not memorable. So let me make sure that it shows up over here. I'm going to bring it up every now and again as well. Manchester. Hello, Kai. Patagonia, Argentina. Hello, Flavia. Wonderful to see you here as well. And then Berlin, Dorothy. Well, I may be like 2 streets away from you because I'm right now in Danziger Straße. Do you happen to be around in Berlin? I'm literally maybe like 1 kilometer away or something. Which street again? It was Danziger Straße in Prenzlauer Berg. We might need to like really bring it up to all the way to the new level. We start, we get online, and then we meet for beers later in person. That's surprising. This is the world. Excellent. Now, thank you so much, everyone, for coming in here. So wonderful to see you all here. I feel free to drop in your questions, any questions that you have, and also, of course, just drop them on, unmic yourself, say hello, and ask anything that bothers you in life. It could be UX related, it could be your career related, it could be design related, it could be anything. So this is the moment of truth, and I'm going to just drop in. Right. First, I'm going to give maybe 30 seconds, everyone, to just be able to unmute yourself and speak. Otherwise, I'm just going to go for the Google Doc, as you desire. Okay, seems like chat first. That's fair enough. So we have one question, and that comes in about SaaS platforms and design challenges with them and resources. So if you have come up with this question, feel free to unmute yourself and ask. That's okay. It's a safe place.
Yeah, it was me.
Yes, yes, I knew that you had 7 questions prepared, Aleta. I knew it.
No, I love your resources and everything, and I use them all the time, but I am in the middle of what do you call it? Well, a job process, and part of it is for a SaaS platform for a travel company, etc. But I'm finding really difficult to find resources and information about designing SaaS platforms and finding like what the best practices are and that kind of thing, and things that I can bring to the interview because I passed to the second round on Thursday that can, I don't know, help me get this job. Because I know
Yes.
I can do it, and I've built platforms
Oh, I
with
have no doubt. We all
fintech.
have no doubt. We'll all cheer
But
for you, I'm sure.
I'm just wondering what your perspectives is and recommendations and things like that, because
Yeah. May I ask what kind of position are you applying for?
it's a UX UI designer position.
Okay.
And the thing I hate about applying for them is usually they say UX and then they want someone who's fully UI, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I have lots of UX skills, I have lots of business skills, I have all that stuff. I've been ramping up and working on my UI skills set so that I can, be there with competition, working on animations, etc.
Right.
But I've noticed that a lot of the jobs now that are being posted are for software as a service platforms. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And me professionally, I worked over 10 years as I'd say like a product manager or a stakeholder manager. And I've used loads of SaaS platforms. I've used Dynamics, I've used Salesforce, I've used all of them. And there's always something I hate about all of them. Dynamics is probably the worst, but I can't, because the platforms are so personal to each company. It's really difficult to find the resources and to know exactly like what the current trends are and what I should be focusing on, and if I have a technical interview, what kind of questions they're going to ask me basically
Yeah.
about that. And
Yeah.
I've created dashboards and things for, I don't know, corporate banking, like HR persons, platforms, etc. But this is completely outside of that. Well, it feels like it to me, but I don't know if it is or if it isn't. And I just wanted a senior's advice for someone.
Yeah, I think in many ways what I see is it really depends on what kind of role they have for you. So because
Hmm.
again, when you're looking at the UX UI position, it could be anything. You might be working on the front end side of things, like designing basically nice, fancy landing pages and things like that. Basically website, but on the other hand, if it's the actual platform, then it's a different level of complexity there. So I think
Hmm.
again, when you're looking at again something like Salesforce, this is ironically, I was working for a very short period of time, um, kind of like in a training, I guess, with a wonderful team behind some of those products. And I
Hmm.
literally sit down just asking them, what do you do? Like, what do you do in your internal software? And they explained to me in the best word that they could find what exactly they do and what kind of interfaces they have and what is the job of that interface. After 10 minutes of staring at them, I still couldn't understand what the hell they're doing actually, because it was really, really complex environment. So I think the main difference or the main challenge is first to understand what is that scope. If it's because if you're working on a front, like customer facing experience, like again, the landing page and maybe dashboard and things like that, that's one story, right? And there, what you probably want to tell them that it's kind of all about storytelling in the end, right? Because
Hmm.
if it's kind of this landing page, then you probably want to present yourself as somebody who understands the business, knows conversion, understands the notion of testing, and a few things like that, right? Now, and specifically, maybe what I would try to indicate very clearly is that um, because again, the ultimate goal is for the businesses to sell, to increase conversion, and so on, that you will be looking into making sure that the business goals are reached in some way. So
Hmm.
not presenting yourself as somebody who can design a lovely and presentable digital experience, but somebody who is understanding business, right? I mean, of course, in some way or the other, it might require understanding the metrics and the KPIs and things that they care about, but really kind of working closer to business. However, on the other hand, if it's something, I just see people coming in. If it's something that's more on the backend side of things, like literally not just the dashboard, but maybe it's processes, or I don't know, it might be something like CRM tool or anything of that
Hmm.
kind, then you probably want to be seen as somebody who can deal with complexity. And
Hmm.
that usually will mean figuring out how to deal with filters, with complex search, with sorting, multi-sorting, nested filters, models, all of that. So depending on the role that you have, I would probably bring up this notion of closer to the business, or the
Hmm.
notion of managing or dealing with filters or these complex components that they probably have, right?
Okay.
And then, of course, one thing that might be kind of a connector between the two is this notion of design system, if they have any or not, right?
Yeah.
Because even if you could look at it and see what this kind of the what it feels like, you could tell whether you should be in your presentation, in you answering those questions, to navigate more towards just complex interfaces that they have, or towards something that is more on the, presenting kind of side of things. Maybe you'll be doing both. I don't know how big the company is, but
It's mainly just their platform that they use that they're, well, the software as a service that they're giving out to companies for
right.
like
Also, it's
booking
B2B.
flights. Yeah, it's business to business, and it's just a platform that they use for companies to book flights, create itineraries,
Okay,
do
okay.
things like that. So I
Yeah.
personally have never done anything within the travel space. Although when I started in fintech, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to hate this. It sounds so boring. And I ended up loving it. So I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, in
Um,
B2B, it's a bit different because then when it comes to B2B, what they probably want to hear is that, and sorry, everyone, we'll get to your questions in just a moment as well. When it comes to B2B, I think what they need to hear is that you understand what B2B space is. I think I
yeah.
posted something about it a while back as well. Yeah, this is, sorry, my friends, this is a story of my life. I have to LinkedIn, Google myself all the time. I do apologize for that, but there is a nice piece on that that I found mm, by Morgan. So that's another, that's one. There's also another one. Actually, I have my private repository, and I'm happy to share it with you, but please don't share it with anybody else because it's not finished yet. So this is everything I've ever published in the history of mine, I guess. Let me just make sure I can
That looks
find
like
it
my
here.
notes.
Oh, yes, yes. Just a second. So here we go. This is the one. Can you see it? No, you cannot, right? Oh, you can, you can. So that's it. And then for B2B, there are probably some things here for sure. Let me just drop it to you, but please don't share it yet.
I won't share with anyone except myself
Uh,
and my brain.
that's okay.
The
So I
business
think,
I've noticed, like in most interviews that I've been doing, like I have a very expansive business background and I know how to work with clients. I've worked with clients for over a decade. And,
mhm.
you know, I don't have an issue with that. But the thing is that then they're like, okay, well, then she can't do UI. And I'm trying to find a balance between explaining to them what I can bring to the company from a business perspective and from my previous career, because I'm a career changer,
Yep,
and like that I am capable if they give me the opportunity to actually execute what it is that they want.
right,
Um,
right.
because I have multiple design degrees, I'm just like, I'm always studying and I just want to make sure that I get this one right.
Yeah, I think that most of
Um,
the time when it comes to any kind of companies, and if anybody is in the same position, it would be the same
mm,
story. Companies ultimately often want to see a couple of things. First, they want to see that you have enough skill to be useful.
mhm.
So they will not have to spend a ridiculous amount of time going through all kind of, I don't know,
Training.
UX training, boot camps, or anything of that kind. That's one thing. On the other hand, what they also want to see is the strong will to learn, like, and I mean, I cannot emphasize this enough, strong will to learn. Like maybe you have learned something recently, or maybe you will probably want to mention it every now and again, like some of the areas that you've been exploring, something that you have learned or have been learning that was challenging maybe, or anything of that kind. That's really important. And of course, another thing that's really significant there, they want you to be a team player, right? So you might want, and again, this is actually quite important. I think in many times, companies present themselves as trying to understand your perspective and things like that, but they ultimately want to know what you have done. So and this is what I see many people doing, we often present ourselves as humble beings, and we should be, but then when they ask you about what have you done in a previous project or a similar project, we often have this tendency to fall back to us. We have done this project, we increased conversion, we improved that, we improved this, we refactored that, we redesigned this. But they want to know what you have done. So don't be shy, not too often, but every now and again say, I did this, right? I was contributed to improving our design system. I contributed to increasing our conversion here and there, right? Not all the time, but they will ask that, because if it's kind of us, then it's not clear what have you actually been doing exactly, right? But it might be uncomfortable to ask that question. So I would always bring up the notion of what exactly you have done, maybe bring up some things that are most relatable to them, of course,
Mhm.
right? So that would be probably like one important. So again, the team player, very important, that you want to learn and that you have enough capacity to support them right away. I think that if you can hit all of those points, that would be important. And in general, I guess, just watch out very carefully about the scope of what they expect from you, right?
Yeah.
Because I was in a position where I was told that I'm going to be hired as a UX consultant, but they wanted me to basically just refine Figma mockups, which was not quite what I was looking for. I hope it helps.
No, that's the thing. That does help though, but they do kind of stretch the truth a lot.
Oh, I see.
And well, from what I've seen, and job interviews and stuff, and they're like, yeah, we're pushing junior positions and we want people to learn and all this stuff, blah, blah, blah. And it's always, oh, you don't have enough experience. And I get that the market's hard and I'm competing against, people with 10 years experience and this or that or whatever. But sometimes they're just like, they just lie, you know?
Yeah, this
You
happens.
know
Well, I
what I
mean,
mean? They just
just
lie, and then you don't know until you get there, and everyone's like, you're judging the company as well. You need to get a good idea of if you want to work with them, etc. But you don't know until you're actually in the company and you are working with them. I don't know if it's just me, but I have a really hard time judging whether or not they're telling the truth or not from the interviews because they're
yeah,
so good at hiding
I
a
think there's a
certain
lot.
job.
Yeah, there's usually a lot hidden between the lines,
Yeah.
indeed. But not only here, but in general, I think even when, I mean, I think most of us had a conversation at some point where we were not getting access to customers or users because there is no access. And very
Mm.
often there is no access, not because these users or customers are holy creatures that live as unicorns somewhere in the far, far, far remote edges of the universe, but just because many companies don't trust you to do the right thing or to do the thing well, I would say. Mostly because there is a very maybe fragile relationship between the customers and the business, and the customers may be paying a lot of money for that service, and so they don't want to disrupt or disturb in any way that relationship. And so kind of one way of dealing with this is to just try to break into the door in some way with small wins first.
Yeah. The other,
Yeah.
I mean, this is my last question, I swear to
Oh, no
everyone,
problem.
and then I'll stop. But there was another one that I've been asked to interview for, and the title of the job, no joke, is UX UI designer, Scrum Master, QA
Oh,
tester.
oh
And
my
I was
God.
like, those are two separate roles.
Yeah.
I
Well,
have
maybe
experience in
three.
DevOps. No, yeah, three. I have experience in DevOps, but I'm thinking, how am I going to do this interview? Because I'm not a Scrum Master. I want to be a
Yeah.
designer. Like, I know I could, but do I want to? And why
Yeah.
are they posting that job? Like, it's just a bit weird, right? That's not something that,
Totally. Absolutely. I think that Nikki is absolutely right when she's saying that that's just a red flag right there.
yeah.
So
Okay.
yes, I think that there's just a lot of companies that are trying their best because unfortunately right now we have the company market, so
Hmm.
they can pull off a lot of things without actually, just trying because why not, right? Let's just see who comes and then here we go. But well, let me try to maybe find more ways to answer your question as we keep going for the rest as
Okay.
well. Yes, but I hope that at least in some way that was helpful. But feel free to add more. That's not a problem. We have like what, 1.5 hours left.
Okay. Thank you so
From
much. I'll be
of
quiet now.
course, of course. No, don't worry. They don't have to be. By the way, everybody, you can unmute yourself. That's okay. You don't have to be like calm behind the scenes. Stefan is saying that's just life. We will learn what the red flags are and what questions to ask to want to walk into such a toxic situation. Yeah, I think there is. I can agree with that because I think in many ways what you probably definitely want to avoid is a situation when you actually do get a role and then you realize that, oh my God, what is this? But then it's not going to look good on your CV if you just quit 1 month later, 2 months later, because there'll be questions asked later. Right. Okay. Thank you so much. I'm an accessibility design consultant and new entrepreneur. Would love to hear your perspective and advice on finding clients that value accessibility. Well, that's a very good point. If you happen to be here in the room, could you please raise your hand or write in the chat, or just so I know what your name is? Oh, it's Nikki. Hello, Nikki.
Yep.
It's wonderful to see you here. So this is a very good point. Where you're located?
I'm in Philadelphia,
Philadelphia.
United States.
So
Mhm.
right now, I see a lot of companies coming my way being absolutely, I would say, flabbergasted. They're just really totally confused about European Accessibility Act and what it means for them.
Mhm.
So for those of you who don't know, European Accessibility Act is a new directive. Well, it's not a directive, it's an act that came in from European Parliament now, okay, well, last year, and it kind of comes into force in June 2025. And by that time, all national governments within the EU must implement it. And what it basically means, or what it basically mandates, is AA WCAG AA compliance, well, 2.2 AA compliance, for both private and public. For public services, it's always been like that. I mean, since 2000, not always, since 2013 or 14. But now it's also for private companies. And most importantly, it's also for private companies around the world that operate with customers within the European Union, right? So why am I talking about this? Well, because I think that if I look at the question here, finding clients, well, maybe I would try to establish myself as a EU Accessibility Act consultant or something like that. Just find yourself attached to that. Because what I see, even to me, companies come to me, and I'm not, accessibility expert by any means, right? But they come to me because they're really worried. And there are two sides of this worriness that you might want to cover, because on the one hand, it's sort of like auditing, because many companies don't even know where they stand in terms of accessibility, just assess what we actually need to do, right? And the second hand, they just don't know what exactly they need to do to fix those issues. So I see a lot of traction about this, and as time passes by, as we're nearing closer to June 2025, I see that this is like a tide, this is like a wave that's coming up. And again, many companies are very, very frustrated and don't know what it means. So what I would do here, that's probably a good idea, maybe, is to set up sort of a blog or something and just write 3, 4, 5 guides around EU Accessibility Act and what it means for enterprise, what it means for B2B, what it means for SaaS, something like that, right? I think in many ways, this is something that might be quite significant. And that also taps into what they need to fix, and they would be probably quite happy to fix that. On the other hand, what everybody, I guess, also here could do, at least try to do, is to maybe, kind of additionally to that, being a solver of EU Accessibility Act, right, for companies, also introduce yourself maybe as a trainer for accessibility for teams, because this is an ongoing journey, right? This is kind of something that many companies will need to maintain, and maintaining accessibility is just as difficult as actually setting it up.
That is certainly something that I am trying to establish myself as a trainer, as a keynote speaker, basically someone who's influential in this space, but still trying to find my way and figure out how to do that.
Yeah, I think what has always helped me, right? And you might be wondering, who is this crazy guy anyway, who's writing on LinkedIn all the time? Well, that's me. I'm basically what I do, and this is what many people actually in different domains are trying to do. They try to be connected with a topic, if I'm being honest. So if somebody thinks of UX, I want my name to come up in a conversation. Right, that's something that I use, of course, for very different things, like for getting project, getting client work, and so on and so forth. Also, whenever something useful shows up, and when I learn something, I desperately want to share it because I think there's so much value in it. There's some really just an incredible amount of really great people just sharing incredible work, and so usually it gets like 12 likes on Medium, and that's it. And that's not fair, because I can tell, oh well, I can use it. This is incredible, and so. The one thing that I tried desperately, I should say, over the last, I don't know how many years, is to really make sure that I can be connected in some way with UX. So that would be like visibility in that case is coming from posting, kind of having maybe even this sort of sessions or webinars or whatnot, speaking at meetups as well. And then always just pick that niche that might work for you. It might be that European Accessibility Act or just accessibility in general, or maybe some people establish themselves really just as accessibility training people. So just accessibility training, like, the Q and a few others, they have a tool, but they also have a training, an academy, and they do just that. That might be kind of a point there as well. And I would probably search for some sort of meetups. There are quite a few online meetups happening. And even if you get, let's say, 50 people, that's quite valuable. There is another way of how some people I know do it when they try to get the word out about themselves. That would be a bit more expensive, though. They basically go to sort of, I wouldn't say accessibility conferences or UX conferences, but they go to these special events around them that they maybe even organize, where they bring decision makers from companies to like in digital space. And that's kind of trying to find important people from important companies in a city or in a country where you are, and then bring them or invite them to an event of sorts where you're discussing, or maybe you invited some people who are discussing things that are important to them. Another way, what I mean by that is, it could be a free event where it's invite only or something like that, where you bring in topics about Accessibility Act and all the things that are important to them right now, and you invite them via LinkedIn or in any other way, by email and so on, and you have a conversation with them. It might seem like, okay, so it will be like what, 5 people, 10 people, 15 people show up? If you get 2 people who are working in relatively big companies, and they are already interested at this point in your work in accessibility in some way, it's actually way easier to have a meaningful conversation that might bring you leads with 15 people than with 500 people. So that's another way of how some people actually try to do that, right? Or in general, for me, probably the most important part has always been visibility. I'm not sure how this helps, but this is something that I would probably try to look at.
No, I certainly appreciate it. Thank you.
Of course. And Stefan is also writing, since we're talking about accessibility, any educational resources you can recommend to skill up with accessibility, since most businesses do not want to get sued and will hire designers. Yes, there is a wonderful course, but it's technical. Practical Accessibility by Sarah Suedan. This one. It goes very deep on everything accessibility. I mean, everything. Not from the design perspective, but more from the technical perspective, how to implement and so on, right? But oh my, this is unbelievable. This is really, really powerful. I can only recommend it. Andre is wondering, can someone explain to me why accessibility is so hardly pushed to design responsibility area? No accessibility requirements, barely fifth part related to design, whereas most of the load goes for code and service component structure. Appreciate your opinion. And I'll get back to this question in just a second. Okay, I just really like ticking off. I don't know if it's just me. I like ticking off checkboxes. That gives me a really good feeling here. So why accessibility is so hardly pushed to design responsibility? Well, I guess, Andre, the main point there is that very often design decisions that we're making, right, they kind of find a way to flow into code in one way or the other. And so if the design is inaccessible, then the code will be inaccessible most of the time as well. Of course, you can speak about colors alone and font sizes and target sizes and so on. But again, those things need to be documented. This also goes for things like motion design, right? There are many, many flavors of accessibility that comes to design. And then, of course, when you really go too deep into the area, like neurodiversity, right? How to accommodate for people with different accessibility needs. This is a very complex area with a lot of nuances that is very difficult to design for. And it's at this point where when we actually, before we start building, we need to have this respected into design. Right. Okay. All right. So I think I could do this like forever. So I better just want to make some progress here. I'm a content designer. Wonderful. I love content designers. Who is a content designer? Please speak up or raise your hand.
Hi, that's me. I'm Corinna.
Hello, Karina. Wonderful to see you here. I love content designers. Well, I
Great.
love researchers as well, by the way, and UX designers. It's not like I have only like content designers are very important, right? But wonderful people here on the call are important, of course, as well. I want to move into research. We have a mature research team who all have PhDs, and I do not have this background, but I'm learning on the job. What tips do you have for learning as much as possible, but more so hands-on learning versus academic learning? The idea is to earn credibility. Oh, that's a good point. I think, oh, that's interesting. All right, and you want to move into research. So, oh, I think I see there is one person waiting in the waiting room. I think, so, okay, maybe if I not necessarily cannot answer that question, I can actually at least explain my perspective. So when I walk in a project, like let's say the big project I'm working right now on with European Parliament, when I walk in, I have no idea about the domain. I have no idea about the vocabulary that is being used. I don't know the processes and how it all works, this is actually really, really challenging. So when I walk in to understand what is around me, like what is that environment like, what's the context is like, I always do the same thing. I always sit down with people who know what they're doing, right? Because they're seasoned in that. And I just ask them to explain the website to me and how they use the website. Just guide me through the website. And they guide me and they show me around and they explain and highlight some of the important features that they find useful and so on and so forth. And I take notes. And as they do, they also speak about the processes that are involved in the environment. How are decisions made? Who is involved? Stakeholders and anything like that. And then I go to another person and ask exactly the same question. Please guide me through this interface and show me what you're doing, right? And I maybe will be speaking to 5 or 6 people. And then after 5 to 6 people, I start getting some sort of an understanding about what these people from this domain, what their work is like. And I usually try to adapt something very similar to pretty much any task that I have. So if I'm going to jump in a domain or go to an area that I feel maybe a little bit uncertain about, where I don't know things just yet, I would just ask, can you maybe guide me through how you do research here? Like, do you use any sort of templates? Do you use any sort of books that you have recommended that you found particularly useful in our work, in our environment? Maybe there are certain things we've done that we are very proud of, that were kind of big successes. Maybe there were some things that didn't go well. That would be useful to know. And then I would go from one to another and kind of really running those interviews with them, asking them for just as much details, information, feedback, and whatever as they can provide, right? So this not necessarily will make you a good researcher, but you will understand how they do research because you probably want to fit into their role, right? You probably want to fit as a partner with them, right? And then once you start getting a little bit of understanding about where you are, you can maybe ask for some small tasks that you can perform. You can maybe prepare a survey. Well, surveys are always very, very difficult to do, and surveys are, in general, not the first thing I would do in any kind of research, right? But they probably will have some scripts for usability testing, maybe, or maybe anything else. And you can maybe run a test run with somebody from your team, or maybe with actual users, right? So you kind of slowly get in, and then you get, again, this credibility with small wins. And then you ask for a little bit more areas of responsibility. Maybe you ask them for, okay, what else do we have in our environment that I might need to know? It's always starts slowly somewhere. Because usually, like the main challenge for me is you have this massive gap, like behemoth in front of you, this huge system with legacy, with the complicated relationships between people, tons of stakeholders. You have no idea what it is. You just map it out and you start somewhere. And it's nice to have somebody who is guiding you. And so I would just jump in research and say, hey, how do you do this? Just guide me through it and then find your way there. That would be probably an approach that I use for everything, probably here as well.
Yeah, that's really good. That's a good strategy, and I appreciate that because I think like the line I'm towing, and we deal with this in content a lot, is that I see this all over LinkedIn that there are people who do research and there are researchers, and I don't ever want to diminish what our actual researchers have earned the ability to do and what they are able to do versus what I would like to do because I find it interesting and enriching. So that's a really good strategy to kind of like be almost like an assistant and take on a piece of the project that I can be trusted with for now and kind of learn the different pieces of the whole and eventually take on more. That's a great strategy. I really appreciate that.
Sure. I think in general, it's like everybody, I mean, so this is a story that has been following my entire life, right? Because very often we tend to feel like we shouldn't ask, or we shouldn't do that, and we should do this. And I think that even on the internet, which can be a very weird place and not necessarily a friendly place, I think if you find good people who really care about the work that they're producing, like doing good research, avoiding bias, and doing good design, and taking care of the accessibility and stuff like that, if you ask for help, I can guarantee you that most people will want to help you, right? This has been the story of my life, because normally you would say, well, that's probably a busy person. They probably wouldn't reply. Well, okay, maybe they won't reply. So you didn't lose much, right? But sometimes they reply, and then you have an incredible partner on your side who really wants to help you. Especially if you're working in the same environment, I think they will carry mountains for you if you really help them in some way or the other. If they all of a sudden you become this sort of a partner on the side to help them, right? And I wouldn't necessarily call yourself an assistant there, but just I want to learn from you. Like, this is kind of what it is, and maybe there is some simple things that I can prepare, can learn from. How do you do things here, right? Because the world is better off with more researchers for sure.
Well, thank you. Yep, partner. I'm going to use that one instead. I
Yeah,
appreciate
that
it.
sounds good.
Thank you.
Sounds good to me. All right. Well, but please don't run away from being content designer. We need content designers as well.
I appreciate that too.
Okay.
Heard.
Okay, here we go. So I'm a senior UX designer looking to advance to a lead or principal position. Any tips or skills I need to develop to advance to that level? Please raise your hand if you happen to be in the call.
Hey, yeah, that's me.
Hello, Brittany. Hello. So
Hi.
I would say that's interesting. That's an interesting question. I think it very much depends on what company is looking for. There are a lot of different this career leveling matrices and so on around, from the big one, the Figmas, the Airbnbs, and so on. But every single company is a little bit different. What I can tell you is that there is one really interesting perception that you probably want to see, kind of frame yourself into when you're actually moving there. So let me show you that. Just a second. This is the moment that I will probably try to find some slides in my huge deck of things. Just a second. I think I have it here. Okay, so please open up. And here we go. And action time. Excellent. Fantastic. So I think there are a few really interesting things here. So I'm just going to show like 5 slides here, but that would be quite helpful. So typically, and again, I want to emphasize one more time that this really heavily depends on the company. Can you see the slides, everyone? Please write a plus in the chat if you do. Yes, okay, excellent. Thank you, Brittany. So very often what we see is that many companies try to find the right box for you, right? So they maybe have expectations about the experience, the level of seniority, the projects that you have championed, and things like that. Now, the overall landscape in the UX can be potentially mapped like this. You have the problem space on the top, you have a solution space at the bottom. You have a business side on the left, and you have the user side on the right, right? Different UX roles can map across all of those different points and dimensions differently. Generally speaking, that can be broken down. Again, this is all in some way or the other, at least parts of UX. Generally speaking, this could be broken down by like this. We have analysis strategy, right, on the left upper corner. Then we have operations, design systems, ops or design ops at the bottom left. Then you have research, and then you have interaction design, which is also basically UI design. Accessibility also would fit in this space. And very often you see these roles that are kind of mapped across different dimensions, right? That's how many companies see it. Now, typically, there are things that companies perceive as being right, and there are things that they would love to see in somebody who is applying for a job. So if we're looking at these roles, so if you are applying for the role of a business analyst, just as an example, in the left upper corner, well, they will probably have an expectation of what you would do. You probably will be dealing with KPIs and metrics, and you'll be probably, again, doing business analysis, breaking down complex tasks, doing sort of discovery workshops, functional requirements, things like that, right? But what I find quite interesting is that at the same time as we see this, and this is very much T-shaped option, right, here. So we have basically very, very clear understanding about, okay, somebody must be really good at, analysis and strategy and have an understanding about everything else. But I think that most of the time what companies are looking for are V-shaped employees. This is an interesting concept from Jeroen Kruijnbrink, I guess this is the right way to pronounce it, where instead of being perceived as a designer with shallow knowledge in a broad range of areas, right, and deep knowledge in one area, you probably want to be perceived as somebody, again, this is sort of like a product designer role, a senior product designer role, somebody with a deep knowledge in one area and gradual growing knowledge in adjacent areas as well. And it doesn't have to fit in these boxes. That's why I showed them. Because what I see sometimes, maybe I actually can highlight. Can I highlight? No, I don't have a clicker with me. Disappointing. But all these little things that you have in the bottom left, right, which could be, you know, the KPIs and metrics, and you might have information architecture, you might have wireframes and mockups and so on, and personas and user research stuff. I think in many ways, when we're looking at this question here, right here, advancing to the level of lead and principal, they want you to be the V-shaped person. So in other ways, it means you should not be just the person who can do excellent design, right? You also shouldn't be a person who can do excellent, maybe research, right? But ideally, somebody who has a pretty broad understanding about this, well, of the space, both the UX space and the business space, and maybe everything in between as well. The more you can demonstrate that you have all these different other areas that you feel quite comfortable with, the better you'll be perceived. That's one thing. But on the other hand, of course, if you're kind of moving to the lead position, that's probably going to be more related to, I mean, if it's a design lead or design manager, that's different, right? And again, if it's design principal or, you know, again, manager, it's different. But I guess at this point, I guess the most important part for them is to see that you've got this, that you can lead a team and that you've been maybe successful in some smaller projects and that you have the capabilities and the understanding of the business, and that's important, understanding of the business to be able to guide design effort or design team in the right direction, right? So I would say broadening this, kind of showing that you have a broad skill or skill set, I guess. Also being able to demonstrate the different projects that you maybe have achieved and have completed in the past and what the impact of them was, ideally the business impact, and also making them feel confident that you've got this. So you know what you're doing and that you've been maybe around for a while, and then you feel like you can actually move it forward. And they don't have to commit to, like, let's say, a big promotion. If you haven't been in this position, they probably want to see you trying things out, maybe championing something, maybe leading a small team and seeing if you can drive that particular small project to success or not. So I never ask for much. I always ask for a little, but then I keep asking for more if I can. Would it make sense?
Yes, thank you so much for explaining that. The infographics also help because I think similar to what another person was saying, the roles are overlapping across various
Yes,
companies,
totally.
and there's instances where I'm too senior over here, but not enough over there. So yes, this is extremely helpful. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just, so normally, please don't speak to businesses about V-shape. They probably will have no idea what this means, right?
Mhm.
But think about this, because this is probably what they expect. Very often, the T-shaped has been just really marketed and branded really well, so people understand T-shaped, right? But I think, again, at this point, where we're looking at the world of full stack developers, right? Developers who understand and know everything. And then product designers. It's not just the designer who just designs things and does a bit of research, but it's also a designer who actually spends a bit more time, maybe closer to the business and closer to the problem space and solution space and user space and business. So it's kind of really almost like a full stack designer at this point. So
Basically, yes.
if you can really show that you're really very much willing and you have been maybe exploring this broad perspective of different areas that are related or maybe even unrelated to design, that might be a good thing. The other thing is M-shaped, which is basically deep knowledge in different areas, right? I don't think that anybody expects it. That's, you know, so when we're looking at the job profile that a previous colleague of ours has highlighted, maybe that is expected. You just do 3 jobs for the price of 1. I mean, if you can present yourself this way, sure, but I think it might be already a red flag there.
Right, just like what the other person was saying earlier.
Exactly.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
No worries, no worries. And of course, what you definitely want to avoid is being I-shaped. That's problematic.
Mhm.
All right, here we go. Let's keep going. Okay. Oh, I love checking checkboxes. So I work as a, okay, let's see how much we have. Okay. Feel free to drop in more. I have all the time in the world. So I work as a UX manager and found lately many positions titled as product manager. All right, designer. What is the difference? And what skill set do I need to do to add to be able to work as a product manager? Oh, this I think are slightly different things here. So I don't know if it was a product manager designer as a designer or just product manager, because this requires a slightly different set of skills. By the way, of course, thank you, Christine. Google Doc, I just drop in a link here as well. So UX manager is basically somebody who is managing UX designers, right? But it's not necessarily product manager. So again, UX manager is somebody who is literally guiding other designers, other UX designers to success, right? It's very much somebody who is going to probably spend quite a bit of time in one-on-ones and with the colleagues, with UX colleagues there, right? Product manager, on the other hand, is driving the entire product. So product manager must have a pretty decent technical know-how and understanding about how we are doing, technically speaking. What's the front-end architecture? What's the back-end architecture? It's a much more broader role. So while a UX manager is very much managing UX people, basically, a product manager manages the entire product. And that involves everything from QA and development and testing and design and research and many other things, right? So typically, when it comes to a PM, the main responsibility that you would have is to make sure that the product is successful, but again, on different levels. So that would require you to go to developers and see where they get stuck and participate in their meetings and participate in, things like, whatever they have, stand-ups and whatnot, and also in many others. And ultimately, you will be the one as a product manager making decisions. We're going to work on that feature. We're going to work on that design. We're going to change that flow. We're going to adjust this, right? So that's really about the success of a product in general. Why UX manager is more about the success of the UX team, and not necessarily success, but how would I put it best? Growth and sustainability of your UX team. So it can deliver on time, and then that you grow the people who are working for you, and then they get better over time, and then you don't get stuck, and then you don't end up with a big number of people leaving the company or anything like that. This is just basically a person who is managing UX people, making sure that they actually grow within the company. And also somebody who'd be maybe potentially responsible for things like hiring or letting people go, on the UX side of things, of course. Right? Does that make sense? I don't know who asked this question.
Yes, I did. Thank you very much. Yes, it does
course.
make that perfect sense.
Okay, perfect. Right.
Thank you.
Of course. In general, I would say, and every time when it comes to the new roles, I need to be very careful because I've seen so many weird things happening in my life lately where UX can mean everything. I mean, literally everything. This was so funny because I got this email on LinkedIn actually from a company, and they said, let's get in a call. I said, sure, let's get in a call. And it was an interesting company. They worked also on very interesting and very complex actually product. And then we have a call. And then they keep talking about, well, we know that we have a pretty advanced, sophisticated product. Expert users actually find it very useful, but the UX isn't great. We just want to improve UX, right? And I keep having the conversation because I'm curious at this point, because I want to know, what does it mean, improve UX, really, for them? I mean, it could be many different things. It could be improving navigation, it could be improving search, it could be improving the UX team effort, it could be improving the design system, it could be anything, right? We just want to improve UX. And so we kept going, and eventually there was nobody who was doing UX. It was developers who were doing UX, basically, right? And they thought that UX is literally Figma design. And that's it. And then I came in with this proposal about, well, we need to understand people. We need to build up sort of journey maps here. We need to understand where people get stuck. We need to understand information architecture. And that was so far away from how they perceived UX that this is where the conversation ended. right? And so you get to this really strange situation. So the same goes for roles. A PM in one company might be, you know, a very different thing in another. Like sometimes you get PO, which is product owner, and you have a PM, which is a product manager, which are apparently different roles. And then PO is more on the technical side. PM is more like managing really this entire product. And PM should be actually related or closely connected to research and UX, but then in some companies it isn't. It's a very technical role, could be anything. So it's really, really important to understand what they actually speak about when they speak about PM or UX or anything really. It's a very complex world, of course, in which we're living. Right. Is it possible to create one design system for different clients with different brand design? If it is, what is the best practice or best approach? Yeah, so there is this notion of multi white label or multi-themed or multi-brand design system that usually starts with identifying something that they all have in common. And usually there will be things like typography, maybe color, maybe spacing, anything like that, right? If it's like a multi-brand, so it's basically one big umbrella brand that hosts other sub-brands. And then you basically share what you can share and then you extend, right? Each of those systems will be extending on their own. However, if you are working, let's say, with a company or in a company that just wants to create design systems out of the box, right, for different clients, which I assume it might be it right here, then you still will have a lot of shared components or a lot of shared attributes at least. You know, basically, usually the big four, the spacing, the color, the typography, and the grid. You will have them in, you know, obviously in every single design system. But then eventually you probably will have buttons and you will have links and so on and so forth. And then you will eventually expand. And then this is when you expand, it will get different. It will just become different because you will have different needs for different products. There are a couple of tools that might help you. There is a design system generator, which was recently released. It was a Figma plugin, was it? Yeah, I think this one. So it basically takes care of the basics, but then you need to build up from there, right? So you don't need to have a maintain one single sort of design system that would be going to everything. That's a good start, right? But then you end up with the same result, right? Initially for all the different clients, but then from there you can extend and grow, which is not too bad. Oh, no worries, Irene. Thank you so much for joining in.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone. Right. So maybe this will help. All right. In general, though, I also, sorry, I'm really not like this, I promise you. But I wrote this thing on LinkedIn about multi-brand design system. This is the best way of how I can find it, I guess. Here we go. Yes, so this might help as well, by the way, just in case you happen to be in this position. Basically, like if you have a particular keyword, my goal is that whenever you search for it on LinkedIn or anywhere else, you will kind of stumble upon something useful. So hopefully you will find it useful. All right. Okay, keep going. Let's keep going. Okay, and do you know any sources to learn about real-time apps UX? I work on an app that leads sales representatives during the sales process. It runs with Zoom on the screen and status is updated during conversation. How to keep balance between help representatives and not to disturb them during conversation? That's a good one. I think anytime I deal with something that's on that level, like operational dashboard monitoring, I always have one single source where I'm going. That's Creative Navy from Medium. I don't know if you're familiar with them. This is an agency, I believe, from Germany, and they specialize in really, really complex systems, right? So that's the one. They have a remarkable, and I cannot emphasize enough, a remarkable amount of content around really complex medical, healthcare, electricity, power supply, university, machinery, manufacturing, my kind of environments. There's just a lot of stuff about pretty much everything, devices and so on. So hopefully you will be able to find some things over there. They probably, I think they also had this big series on data dashboards. Data dashboards? Oh, yes, here we go. Medical data dashboards and regular data dashboard. So hopefully you'll be able to find something useful from here and also from here. And again, this is so sad. They get like what, 3 likes, 5 likes, 115 likes. And this is a remarkable amount of research with screenshots and everything. They really deserve more credit. That's an incredible resource for anything, any complex UI. And then there is another one, which I think is actually quite cool. It's called Open Breach Maritime Design System. They have a lot of examples there. Open Breach Maritime Design System. It's open source, and they have like really, really complex interfaces, and it's beautifully designed. So you can take a look and see if there's something that might be for you here. So if you go to, I don't think it's public in Figma, or maybe it is actually, I think it is. Yep, it is. That's pretty cool. So that's a lot of really complex interfaces right there and templates that they're using. So maybe there'll be some value in there. Come on, please load. Yes, so with settings and everything is there. It's incredible.
Thank you so much.
Of course, it's my pleasure, Nana. Fantastic. Here we go. So like they're really, really great at this. What can prevent former programmers from becoming good UX designers? Please raise your hand if you happen to be in the room.
It's me again.
It's me. Wonderful, Nana. Wonderful to have you here. The answer is nothing. Nothing. So I think that if you put a lot of effort into it, you know, it's just so ridiculous because, you know, very often we have this really strange perception about the world, which is just wrong. Like, for example, please write a plus in the chat if you have a close friend who is working in sales. The best friend who happens to be working in sales. Okay, we have Nikki here. 1+ in the room out of, I don't know, 35 people. Right? We often think as designers, that sales are, you know, sales, right? We do all the hard work and then sales just basically sells it, right? That's not fair. We care about the customers and we put a lot of love and passion into crafting those pixels so people really feel passionate about them and can do what they want to do. And then salespeople just sell it. The reality is, of course, that we have just a really misled or wrong perception about it. Because there is never been the time when there is more overlap between what designers are interested in and what salespeople are interested in. It's a massive overlap today for a very simple reason, because most applications are SaaS applications and they are very much subscription driven, or they're based on subscription. So there is a strong desire from the sales team to know and understand what will keep their customers on the app or on the product or in the system. So they're deeply invested in understanding what and how the customers succeed and where they fail. So it's not surprising to me, but it's very surprising to many designers to find that sometimes UX researchers are sitting not in the UX team, they're sitting with the sales team or customer success team or even marketing team, right? It's like, what? Yes, because there is a massive overlap. We as designers care about the end users. We want to know as much as we can about them. So do UX researchers, but so does sales and also probably marketing, because they want to address the right audience. And the same thing goes for, again, kind of the skills, because I think that in many ways, if you have a programmer or developer who is very keen and interested and very passionate about all the fine work that they're producing, they maybe care about accessibility and maybe care about, you know, just making sure that people can actually do the tasks that they're supposed to do. That can be a wonderful example of a really great UX designer, or the other way around, right? You know, in fact, if you have both skills at some point, both development skills and UX designer, then you really have become an actual unicorn, right? And many companies desperately want that. So don't let yourself be stopped. You can do this. I think you can. I mean, unless it's maybe not about you, but somebody else, right? So
Yeah, it's about me. Thank you.
okay, no worries. Okay, we have a few more questions coming up. Okay, a participant has set the caption language to Portuguese, so it's either going to be Estonian or Portuguese today. That's very surprising. I'm not quite sure Portuguese, but I hope can I change the settings? I think I can. If you have changed it to Portuguese, could you please change it back to English, just in case? All right, thank you for accessibility consulting advice. Now I'm interested in whatever advice you have for fear of failure when it comes to creating content and just simply being more visible, knowing I'm not alone in this fear. Yes, I think there are some challenges with that. I think I had some really different experiences in my life. I have to say some of them not very pleasant, because it's not because from being public or visible or so. It's just it might feel, and this is definitely how I felt a long time, that if you just write once something wrong, then that's it. Like, this is it, because people will never forget that, and this will make grounds, and this will humiliate you, and anything like that, right? And so, again, I would say when I started writing articles and so on, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago or so, I felt like, oh my God, I cannot allow myself to be wrong at all, right? But then there was a profound, I guess, advice that came from a friend of mine who was my mentor back in the day. And he said that, well, actually, if you are really sincere and honest about it, there is no ultimate sense of truth in UX. Everybody's doing something different in one way or the other. We can say that, well, we shouldn't do that, but there are probably use cases where we could do that. If you think about, like, even some things like, I don't know, carousels, there are use cases for carousels. Some people might hate them, some people might like them. There are some use cases for everything. Well, maybe except Parallax. Parallax is just very frustrating to so many people. That's a separate story. Maybe I will make an exception for Parallax. That's just evil, pure evil on earth. But beyond that, I think there is no ultimate truth. And so you can argue about things being right or being wrong, right? But ultimately, it's your experience. And actually, I would say that most people want to hear your experience. So unless you position yourself as somebody who knows the truth, and this is how it should be, and this is it, then you're probably going to make enemies. Because there are some people who are going to say, well, this is not research because you haven't done this. Or this is not a proper survey because it doesn't include this, which might be true, right? But I still think that even if you happen to be in a position where you maybe don't have enough skills yet to do the proper research or to run a proper survey and so on, how are you supposed to learn if you never do it, right? So you kind of need to start somewhere, and ideally, again, it would be with somebody who actually understands it and cares about it and wants to teach you and so on. But in many ways, I think this fear of failure has never gone away from me, right? Just probably the one thing that I try to keep in mind is that, this word from, a dear friend of mine, Marco, he said, when he said that there is no ultimate truth. So as long as you're speaking about your experience, what has worked for you and how it worked for you, and what you learned from it, it can never be wrong. If you try to position yourself as a knower of the truth and tell other people how they should do their work, then you get into trouble. So that has been helpful. So everything that I write is not about the things that I know for sure are right. It's just something that I learned. So that would be kind of it, really. So I don't think that you're alone in this fear for sure, right? But especially in the beginning, I would say, don't postulate something as a, oracle, like this is how it is, right? Because people will have opinions, but rather this is how it is for me. That might be much, much better. And I would love to read it, by the way, whoever wrote this. Right. All right.
Thank
Okay,
you
there
again.
is one.
I love that.
Okay. Nikki.
Yeah.
All right. Of course. Of course. All right. Let's keep going. Okay. There is this question over here, but there's also one from Andrea. Maybe I can actually answer Andrea's one very quickly. What do you recommend when trying to find out what topics to write about? How do you come out with all the great topics? Oh, I'm just really struggling with big problems all the time. Like, for example, just the other day, a friend of mine also from the X community was just wondering about, are there any sort of guidelines around voice UX, how to design for voice? We have all this Alexa, we have Gemini, we have all the Siri and all this stuff, but he was struggling with finding anything about voice. And I couldn't find anything about voice either. But then eventually, I think 2 months later or so, I think, yeah, maybe it was written that it's totally mixed up for me. I just stumbled upon a Medium article about voice, and I added it to my bookmarks. And then when there is enough, I'm just curious. I just want to learn. I don't know about you, but when I wake up in the morning, then I go in the shower, I realize, what is it like to be a left-handed person? Right? These are the things that bother me in life because I never know, right? Then I thought, are there any kind of challenges there? Like, what is it like? And then it's just, you just write it down. And then every now and again, I guarantee, eventually something will come up that will nudge you toward that topic. And so I'm maintaining this list of topics that I'm interested in. And that's, I kind of want to use later eventually for some sort of posts, right? So like, I don't know, principles of UX animations, and I found this incredible Dutch police design system, and I thought, wow, a design system for police, that's pretty cool, that's interesting, but then it's not complete. So I'm waiting, this is why it says waiting for Spotlight. I'm waiting until it gets completed or so, because it's not public yet. And I'm willing to wait for 6 months until they get public. And the moment it does, I'm going all in on it to explore what they have done, patterns and stuff like that. I like design system buy-in, anything like that. So I basically just write it down as notes, and then I think about, maybe there are things to write about, to talk about. It's very simple, just Notion. My pleasure, Andrea. Right, let's keep going. We have all the time in the world here. During my entire career, my UX UI development has been focused on HTML, CSS with an emphasis on accessibility. I'm looking for a new job, but all positions seem to want extensive experience in tech stacks, have no experience with things like React and Vue. How can I emphasize my value in applications and show employers what I do matters? I'm worried I'm becoming obsolete. Good point. I think you can try to fit or kind of introduce yourself as one of two roles. Either, that's what I see some teams doing, either it would be something like design engineer. Some companies have no idea what this means, but in some applications you see this appearing. It's kind of somebody who is, hold on, not design engineer, is it? No, it's UI engineer. It's UI engineer, sorry about that. So the idea there is, well, it's somebody who understands accessibility, right? Who understands HTML, who understands CSS. So sometimes you find that. Also, sometimes it's positioned as front-end designer, right? Depends on where your focus is. So if you're spending more time on development, right, HTML, CSS, and so on, then you probably are engineer. But then if you're somebody like, again, more on the design side of things, but also do front end, then maybe you could call yourself front end designer. Again, Sarah Suedan, she calls herself also, this is the course about accessibility, right? Practical accessibility. She calls herself, I think, let's just double check. Well, inclusive design engineering or inclusive design engineer. That I haven't seen on job openings anywhere, but design engineer, UI engineer, UX engineer, maybe something like that. So it could be something over there, right? You don't have to sell yourself as a full stack engineer, right? Because you probably are not, right? But if you try to see yourself as somebody with this, and maybe also something like with focus on accessibility, right? I don't know if I would call it accessibility engineer or so. That's probably too far. That some people might be confused what it means. But things like UI engineer, design engineer, something like that, maybe front-end designer, this could be probably a better way to position yourself. But I don't think you're becoming obsolete. Again, especially when it comes to accessibility, there is a lot of need for it now, like a lot of need. All right, let's keep going. We have 20 more minutes. I'm torn about what to prioritize showcasing in my portfolio. Actual projects I worked on for specific companies, building e-commerce websites, mobile apps, or internal SaaS applications versus personal passion projects versus AR, VR, and so on. What are your thoughts about that? I think, okay, so there are two ways of doing this, I think. On the one hand, I see some designers who really want to position themselves as being good in one specific thing, like literally having maybe a dedicated section, something like healthcare UX, right? And they would write about healthcare UX, and they would post about healthcare UX, They would show examples of healthcare UX that they have done, right? So with the goal basically to be noticed by companies that are working in healthcare and that need UX. So you kind of want to be combined with that specific thing. If this is what your specialty is, that's fine, right? On the other hand, if what the companies also want to be seen in a portfolio, I guess, and again, this is maybe I'm not the right person to answer that question because I don't even have a portfolio, to be honest, right? At least not public one. I would say when they are looking for a company or for a person who could be a good fit, they are looking for their needs and somebody who can fulfill those needs. So don't necessarily want to see a portfolio where you have everything from SaaS to e-commerce to healthcare to whatever, right? So they are looking for something that fits their needs. So that would mean for me really showing your kind of, not instead of having just a big diversity of different things that you can do, having maybe these little hubs where you present the different topics and you present them well. And ideally, this would be case studies as well. I think case studies work fairly well, especially if you are working on something that is very similar to what other companies are actually exploring at this moment, what they're struggling with, right? So if you could have, again, case study highlighting, I don't know, like an internal SaaS application that you've been working on recently, right? You might be expecting some SaaS companies reaching out to you. But for that, I think you need to do more than that. Instead of just showing, I don't know, your recent SaaS applications, I would really try to make sure that you have a lot of content about SaaS as well. It's just, I guess, content marketing partially. So you probably want to have a guide for internal SaaS applications and stuff like that. I guess you might be under NDA, so it might be difficult to show it. I think one person that does it fairly well, but I don't know for sure, is Adam, because Adam really positions himself as a solution for these different industries: EdTech, SaaS, AI, and FinTech. And for each of those, you have a dedicated area of what they can do and what they have done, right? With the brands and everything. So I don't know if it, frankly, if it works well for Adam or not, but that's something I would probably try to explore as well, along with some guides on, those industries. Like I would probably include some sort of guide, handbook, state of 2024 in SaaS design or anything like that. Right? Hopefully this helps. Right, I guess this was the same one. All right. In general, when it comes to topics, by the way, it depends really just on what you find interesting. I think if you find the right niche that is big enough and where you don't see a lot of people, this can be remarkable. Again, you could be literally nothing but internal SaaS applications person. And that can be perfectly fun. If you have a lot of projects like that, then people might stumble upon you, especially if you write and post and being public about it. Right? Hi there, I've been working on IT for over 8 years and have decided to switch gears to the exciting world of UX UI design. We need you. We need you with us. So that was a good decision, great decision. After completing my studies in 2023, I've been using AI tools like ChatGPT and other applications help me apply for jobs and tailor my resume to pass through ATS. Red flag, very important. ATS exists, but usually, from what I have understood, when it comes to ATS, it's a first run, but then it will be checked by a human being anyway, right? So it's not like if you don't pass through ATS that you will never make it, right? Typically, some things that are dismissed by ATS will still be reviewed by a human being. So I might be wrong, of course, about this, but there were a couple of people who are working in HR and they wrote, what was that? It was an article, was the webinar, which basically said that ATS is a part of the journey, but this is basically the way it works is it takes the application that it gets and then it creates a table with some of the key insights, but then all of them are manually reviewed. So it's not like you're going to be scored based on your, whether you pass ATS or not alone. That's one right there. However, I'm still not landing the positions I'm aiming for, and I'm wondering if it's something about my portfolio resume of experience. Could you please share any suggestions or insight that might help me improve my chances of breaking into the field? I'm not sure I'm the right person to answer that question, I think. I think that depends on the role that you're applying for. Because right now we're living in a situation where there is just a lot of, well, frankly, a lot of unemployed designers, researchers, and so on. So it might be that just many companies just feel like they need somebody who has a decent level of experience, right? And they don't have any open position for somebody who has year, 2 years maybe of experience. Maybe that's like that. I'm not sure I can really be helpful here, to be honest. What I would try to do probably is to um, maybe really, if you happen to be more on the front end side of things, I don't know if it's front end or just IT in general, maybe you could position yourself as some sort of UI engineer, so it's kind of clear that you are connected more on the technical side, because if you have a lot of experience in IT, it's valuable, right? It has a lot of value. So I wouldn't just dismiss it and just apply as a UX designer or UI designer, right? Maybe you can tweak it a little bit and see or show yourself as being more on the side of code engineering development. There is no harm in doing that, I think. That's probably the only thing I would try, to be honest. Oh yes, so this is also a good point from Stefan. I think the reason that is that IT and engineers who transition to UX aren't getting interviews is because people who sort candidates do not consider their prior engineering experience applicable for UX design work. Could be as well. So this is why I'm saying maybe don't try to apply necessarily specifically for, again, UX UI roles. Thank you so much for the comment, Stefan. But for more technical design roles, if there are any. No worries, Yaris. Well, thank you so much for joining for the question. You've got this. We're cheering for you, all of us together in this room. UX technical design is a good idea, I think. Corina, I'll get to your question in just a moment as well. Let's see, we have 2 more. Fantastic. I'm a senior product designer specialized in design systems and design ops and currently looking for jobs. Recently, I got some interviews, first round. There will be design challenge. If I get into further rounds, do you know what kind of questions or challenges that are specific to design system roles? Do you have any insights? Oh, that's a good question. I think I stumbled upon something. Let me just double check in my repository here. So I think there was something. I'm not sharing the screen, am I? No, I do share the screen. Okay, let me just check. Yeah, because I think I saw something about the question specifically for design systems. I mean, typically the questions that will come up is often, yeah, I haven't seen so many. It will be something along the lines of how do you decide when to add a new component, right? What would be your process of adding a new component? How would you frame and design a contribution process? Things like that, which are really difficult. There probably will not be any questions around how do you run kind of an audit or so. Maybe something around naming. Like naming is really something that many people struggle, right? When I look at design system here, this one, just double check. You see, this is something I have to learn now because I'm curious now, indeed. I don't have anything on that. So I'm going to edit here, design system interview questions. I think there was something, was it Romina? Maybe design systems interview questions. No, I think nothing here. I will have to check and look, but I don't think I can help you here. Not this, not this, not this. Well, here we go, the design system interviews. Maybe this helps, by the way, but I haven't read it, so I don't know. But Romina's guides are really nice. Oh, this is just interviews. Okay, this is not like how to do an interview. Yeah, so I have to explore. Frankly, I don't know. In general, though, Nikki is right as well, because usually design challenges are seen as not the state of the art of general interviews. For example, I would not perform well in a design interview in front of everyone. I need time. I need to think. I'm just really bad at just saying, oof, I know exactly what to do. Like sometimes some companies try to do that to figure out how you think and so on. I can show how I think, right? But I cannot find solution on spot. I need time. So I probably need more time than some other people. But for me, this is challenging, right? So there is that. However, what I would try to do is to have sort of kind of a process in mind about how we deal with the usual suspects. Again, something like how do we design a contribution process? Where do we start there? What about naming design tokens and things like that? How would it work and how do we organize it in Figma in the first place? Also, I think very important and very often forgotten, if you are in a position where you go for rounds of interviews, you probably want to be seen not just somebody who understands design systems, how to build one, but also how to establish it. And I would highly encourage you to think about governance, how to make sure that design system remains relevant and is actually used. This is probably the question that will come up. Something along the lines of, well, so you're thinking of doing a design system for a big project, for a big company. How would you actually start there? Like, what would be the starting point? And I guess the wrong answer to that question would be, I'm going to start with naming design tokens. Instead, what you probably want to see is, okay, what are the needs that we have there, right? Who actually is going to use or consume that design system? Why do we want to have one in the first place? What is the scope of it? Like, what are we talking about here, right? And maybe we need to actually create a base that will expand to different brands. Do we have multi-brand experience? Do we have one single brand? Is it like something like a B2B sort of environment where maybe design a system like white label software or so? So this would be kind of just research, I guess, the usual stuff there, right? I'm not sure if this is helpful, but that would be kind of my take on this.
Thank you. It's helpful, Vitaly. Thank you. It's from me.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Absolutely, Dorothy. Thank you so much. A good friend of mine has 10 years front-end development experience for high visibility companies like Nokia, Macy's, and Gap. She just graduated from UX bootcamp and is working on transition to UX. I advise her to reframe her front-end experience to UX terminology, good call, on her resume and create UX case studies based on her past front-end work. What do you think about that advice? What would you recommend? Yes, again, also a similar story like we saw previously. Maybe if a person has a friend has a very strong front-end development experience and can articulate that they or she, I guess, also understand UX and have been going through improving their UX skills, right? I would not hide my front-end development experience at all. If anything, that's a very valuable skill to have. Many designers don't possess it at all. So as a minimum, right, I would try to make one little thing, like really one little hint here. So if you have a design system in place, that means you have developers who are working on the design system, right? So you could show yourself as a great bridge between designers and developers or engineers who are going to implement either design system or even if it's just handoff, right? Because you understand the technical side, you understand the UX side. So you can be that bridge that's very often missing. This is why we have this incredible amount of articles where everybody's complaining about handoff being so difficult, right? Because there is never this glue that connects the design side and the development side. So maybe you could show yourself like this, or there is no harm in again showing yourself as a front-end designer or again UX engineer or UI engineer, right? I think there is value in both. And in fact, I don't mind again reframing it as a UX terminology, but they still will probably expect you to show some UX work that you have done and the impact of it. And one thing that I want to actually emphasize, and I was very surprised by that. Some of you might be familiar with the STAR framework of presenting your results or insights. And usually I would think, come on, give me a break. Really? Do people even pay attention to those things? Is it just written somewhere in business books and that's it? Apparently, there is a lot of business people who, especially people who are going to interview you maybe, who deeply care about you giving their insights in that specific way. right? And again, it seems like a stupid thing to do, but it might be a good idea for that job interview to be prepared like this. So you explain the situation in which you happen to be, you explain the task that you had, the action that you took, and the result that you had. So that order is important, and presenting it in that way is important as well. So to some business people, it might be a red sign or warning signal if you don't present it in that way. I couldn't believe it before I saw it with a friend of mine, happening to a friend of mine. So that was like, oh my God, really? So that's what's decisive to judge a person, and apparently to some people it is. Anika is writing that my last company were tasked to grade the interviews on the star format. Okay, here we go. Right, very surprising, but yeah, that's better to be prepared than sorry. Right. I think there was also one more question that came from Karina. Yep, absolutely, Stefan. There was one question that came from Karina before. I'd love to hear why you see value in content designers. I would say my company is so on content and is getting better at seeing our value, but would love to hear from your perspective how I can better communicate our value and have partners like PMs and even some designers see me as more than a copywriter. Well, I think in many ways it all starts with a very stupid example for me. But this always starts with error messages. Because I've been in companies where they struggled a lot with the conversion, and they optimize the hell out of the checkout to make sure it works well and is fluid and works just as it's supposed to be. But the problem was that people were not able to recover because the error messages were not designed well, right? And so we got to the point where we said, let's organize and structure and refine and reframe our content there. And I guess it might be a role of a UX writer, right? Oh, I mean, content design is maybe a little bit different, I guess, right, as well at this point. But this had a tremendous impact, like a tremendous impact, just fixing those things. Very often, it's all about giving people what they need to know so they don't get any doubts or any concerns or anything of that kind. And a good example of that, which I stumbled just recently upon, which I also want to just highlight here because I saw it and I was, oh, wow, this is quite impressive. Let's see, which one was that? Yes. Okay. Slow. It was this one over. No, this one. So in many ways, I guess that is sort of a role of a content designer to organize the page, an e-commerce page, to make sure that everything is in the right place. Some people see it as a conversion optimization specialist or anything of that kind. But what we see here is just a way of organizing content in a way to present it to make sure that everything is in the right place. And there are a few things that need to be visible at all times, right? But this can have a tremendous impact. If you're working in e-commerce, oh my, this can have a tremendous impact on conversion, like right off the spot. If you're working anything like SaaS or so, people need to complete the task, or maybe it's even like internal enterprise software, people need to complete tasks. Like making sure that the right content is in the right place can really speed up efficiency. And what I always do is the same for any kind of impact that I want to demonstrate. We always say, okay, so we're working on this product. Can we please define something like 10 or 12 representative tasks that people do in that environment? If it's a bank, well, we're probably going to process mortgage applications. We're probably going to process people signing up for an account or something like that. So when people do that, how much time do they need to do it successfully? And on the other hand, for internal employees, how much time do they need to process that application? And then how high is the success rate for both, right? And then we say, well, can we just do a little experiment and adjust the wording here and there to make it a bit more clear, to make sure that people don't stumble upon mistakes or failures? And then we do the same measurement for these 12 top representative tasks that must be signed off on the high level. So we look at the success rate and we'll look at success times. And usually content has a tremendous impact there. You can probably shave off usually 10, 15, 20% of the time needed to get things done, right? So that's just my take on this. So this is why I think overall content has a remarkable impact on any kind of UX work, really. No worries, no worries. Thank you so much, Nikki, for joining. All right, and I think, dear friends, I even went through everything, I think. Checkbox, yes, made it fantastic. So thank you so much for joining in. I hope that there were some useful insights in here. If you want to explore more, I have, so what do I have? I don't know. Yeah, well, I do have this video course here. So feel free to drop in and enjoy if you like. There's a coupon code LinkedIn. I was told that I should mention it. So feel free to use it. But feel free to use it. We'll give you like 15-20% discount. I don't remember even anymore. Right. And I hope to see you again soon. LinkedIn, everywhere else. Thank you so much for joining. I hope it was useful. If you have any sort of feedback or something, send me a message on LinkedIn. I'm very talkative, maybe a little bit too talkative, I guess. I'm not sure. Right. So thank you so much, everyone, and hopefully see you next time.